Get the power to do more with Storable software. More automating, more control, more revenue, more time back in your day. Storable helps operators do more with the most powerful technology in self-storage. Learn more at storable.com/do more.
So we will go ahead and get into today's conversation. So my name is Matthew Beal, and I'm a product marketing manager here at Storable, and I am your host for the 4-operator webinar series. And before we get into the actual content, if you don't mind going to the next slide for me here, Cameron, I wanted to take a look at kind of our webinar series at a glance and kind of where we're taking it as well. So first up is 2 weeks ago, we hosted an operator roundtable on this concept of rethinking the tenant experience. It's one of our 4-operator imperatives. And the theme behind the conversation was kind of the needs and the preferences of your customers have been shifting a lot over the last few years towards a more digital experience. And the COVID-19 health crisis has really accelerated those trends. And so we had Bill Roberts of Staylock Storage and Mark Yandow of Self Storage Management of California on for a roundtable to walk us through kind of some of the trends and the innovations that they've been seeing and how they're meeting those evolving digital preferences of their customers. So if you missed the webinar, if you go to blog.storable.com, you can find all of our past recordings. It was a really great conversation, so I'd recommend you go check it out. But today we're going to start a new chapter of our 4-operator imperatives webinar series, and it's going to be on a discussion of simplifying and automating processes. And so we've got an exciting guest who you already see on camera here, but I'll be introducing momentarily. That's going to be discussing all the resources that you guys kind of have available to you to eliminate unnecessary tools, centralized processes, and leverage automation to kind of unlock efficiency both for yourself, but also for your, your corporate and your facility staff. And then in 2 weeks, just to give you a little bit of preview, we're going to be hosting yet another operator roundtable, continuing that same theme of simplifying and automating processes. And so we're going to have another set of knowledgeable operators on to discuss how they're bringing that to life across their portfolio. So stay tuned for some more details on that next week from the Storable team. All right, and so let's dive into a little bit of context here. So I wanted to talk a little bit again about the market forces that have kind of led us to have this conversation and why we should care about these things we're going to be discussing today. So in 2013 and 14 and 15 here in the storage industry, operators, self-storage operators were really seeing unprecedented revenue and NOI growth. And this attracted a lot of developers that were taking advantage of being able to build at kind of a 9 or a 10 cap rate and sell those stabilized facilities at a 6 cap rate. And you can kind of see that on this construction value put in place chart in the top right-hand corner here. And on the next slide, as a result, you'll see that, we ended up experiencing the largest development cycle in the industry's history. From 2015 to 2018, we were adding almost 1,000 new builds annually. And starting in 2019, we saw that consumer demand wasn't really able to keep up with that growth, that record growth. And so operators have started to kind of figure out how they can be more efficient with both their operations and marketing efforts. And the COVID-19 health crisis really only further accelerated that trend. But we don't believe any of that's doom and gloom. We've been talking a lot about how really the self-storage industry has been, it's continued to perform really well compared to a lot of other industries. But on the next slide here, there are challenges that remain. And so we created this webinar series, the 4-operator imperatives, to provide you with a framework that prepares you to combat those market forces and put your business in a position of strength coming out the other side. So each of these imperatives and their components came from countless conversations with our clients, our vendors, our subject, and some various subject matter experts in the industry. And they're at the core of how these folks are approaching optimizing both their operational and marketing performance in the face of these market forces. So let's take a look at these on the next slide. So the first one, it's all about optimizing your marketing spend. And so we've had a good number of conversations on how you can utilize SEO, PPC, listings management, and reputation management. We also had a roundtable on all of these topics where we've talked about some of the creative things that people are doing to stand out in this space. But we also recently concluded our last chapter, which is rethinking the tenant experience. And so we discussed 4 steps that you can take to ensure that you're meeting those evolving needs and preferences of your customers, those digital preferences that we were just talking about a moment ago. But today we're excited to open a new chapter of this conversation, this book, and it's on the concept of simplifying and automating processes. And so the theme of this chapter is really how can you focus on freeing up yourself to drive value to your business in a variety of other ways by simplifying and automating your existing processes. And then in the coming weeks, we're going to transition our discussion to our last operator imperative, which is amplifying your operating revenue. And so the concept here is how can we add valuable services for your clients for your tenants, which also provides, ancillary revenue streams for your business. But without further ado, I want to introduce today's guest presenter. This is Cameron Barragan. He is a Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Storable, and he's going to be walking you through the simplifying and automating processes part. So Cameron, take it away.
There's the mute button. Awesome, Matt. Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. And guys, just for a little bit more context, my name, again, Cameron Barragan, Director of Product Marketing here at Storable. But I've been here for about 2 years. Worked really closely with our product team and with a lot of our customers to better understand why they work with us and what specifically the things are that they need for us to continue to deliver and the new things they need for us to bring to market. And so I spend a lot of my time with operators like you, learning what it is that makes their businesses tick. And so that's really at the heart of kind of what my role here is. And so what I'm here to talk about today is, I think, whether you turn on the news or what you're doing, everyone's going to talk to you about COVID-19. I think we're at a place where we're essentially moving past that and recognizing that, hey, that there have been some shifts that have happened in the market, and some are here to stay, and we want to make sure that we're helping our customers best navigate in the context of those changes. And so that's really at the core of what I wanted to speak to this group about today. And I think in terms of actually bringing that to life, I don't think anyone has done a better job of this than the Microsoft CEO. I think it was in their earnings call 2 or 3 months into the health crisis. He said, "We've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months." And I think to me that resonated so much because what's implicit in this statement is that it's not a matter of I guess what's implicit in this statement is that there's kind of a permanence here. Right? We've seen a shift towards certain types of buyer behavior and customer behavior, storage shopper behavior specifically, that's here to stay. And I think it's accelerated things at a much higher rate. Things that we were seeing like a shift to digital across all generations is something now that we've seen accelerate. We need to make sure that as an industry, we're prepared for. And so another illustration of that comes from Bain & Company. They just released a report in the last few weeks that talks about how much digital transactions have increased compared to in-person transactions since COVID-19 hit. In the last several months, we've seen it actually go up by 18 percentage points above where we anticipated it being on the normal kind of growth trajectory. So that's significant. And that just speaks to the acceleration of what we're seeing. And it's not just purchasing things from Amazon because you don't want to go to the store. This is across industries. And so this factors in even buying cars. This would be a much higher rate for consumer packaged goods and things like that. So this is just an interesting concept to see how it's played out across industries. And at SpareFoot, at Storable, we've seen that as well, specifically with our SpareFoot product. We track a number of different data sets that really give us insight into aggregate across the market, what's happening in the storage industry. One of the things that we look at to see how folks are using digital is just looking at our traffic to the marketplace product, our SpareFoot product. And for anyone that's not familiar with it, essentially what it is, it's a storage marketplace where storage shoppers can go to find storage that meets their needs. And so what we've seen, it's pretty similar to what you'd expect. We've actually seen that, after the shock of COVID-19 hit in March and April, we've actually seen traffic increase pretty significantly above where it was in 2019. In fact, we've seen that grow by 20%, which is a much more significant growth rate than we would have anticipated year over year in a normal year. And what that speaks to is that as we've seen restrictions become more lax in a number of different areas, we're seeing that this pattern of people shopping online for storage is continuing to increase. And based on, we've heard this anecdotally from a number of our customers as well. Online move-ins are up substantially. Online reservations are up substantially. This is not just isolated to what we're seeing in SpareFoot. This is something we're seeing across the board. And the question I think that becomes an important one is what happens next? Are we going to see people return to the same behavior that we always have? And a lot of experts are pointing to the idea that no, we're not. There will be a correction back closer to where we were, but we've become accustomed, and we're going to continue to be more comfortable transacting online and working online. And so that is something that we're anticipating seeing continue to be high, and something that we expect will be kind of the new normal, to use a little bit of an overly used phrase. So we're going to continue to track that data and keep you guys updated on what that means through this webinar series, through the information that we share. But really, we see it as our goal to make sure that we're helping the industry, not just our customers, prepare for the changes in digital. Now, what that means is that changes the way fundamentally that we have to think about operations. With digital, there are opportunities to engage with customers one-to-one, tenants, storage shoppers, but that also means that there are areas where we're going to need to create self-service capabilities and what has sometimes been deemed a dirty word in this industry, automation. Automation is going to be key to a lot of those different aspects. And I think one of the things that I think is probably the biggest misnomer is that people see automation as something you either go all into and you become a completely unmanned facility, or you don't do any of it. And I think that's a little bit of a false choice. There's definitely more to it than that. And so I do think there's an opportunity to think about incremental automation and how that can help you enhance the efficiency of your operation and save money, while actually delivering a better customer experience across the board, especially in the context of these consumer expectations that have been changing and will continue to be a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. And so what I wanted to point you guys to is really this idea that there's this whole idea that as you increase in technical maturity, you have an opportunity to drive increased efficiency. And that's really what you see at the bottom of this illustration. And I think I've done a little bit of an exaggeration here, right? To say, to put two ends of the continuum on here, to say one is pen and paper, tracking everything by hand and spreadsheets, and you just using Outlook for communications and using file folders. I'm not to say that there's a lot of folks that are doing that today, but we know that there are still some that are. And I put that on one end of the continuum, and on the other end, we put in the fully automated sites where nobody is on site. There needs to be recognition that there's a big gap in between there. And that gap is an area that we call practical automation. And there are a lot of things that I would imagine the folks on the phone today are doing, but there are probably a number of things I'm going to talk about today that maybe you aren't. And these are areas where you can recognize a ton of efficiency while you're improving the tenant and storage shopper experience at the same time. And so that's really the key of what I'm going to be sharing with this group today. And so as we think about what those things are, we've really entered a new era, and this is the era of practical automation that we've entered into as consumer expectations have accelerated the pace in which they're shifting. And so these are becoming more and more table stakes. And so there are 5 things that I'm going to walk through with this group today. The first is self-service transactions, making sure that customers can engage with you in the way that they want to, whenever they need to, on their terms. That's becoming more and more of an expectation. Another thing here is auto-generated marketing operations in financial reporting. Right now, a lot of the folks we work with, or operators that I talk about either now or in the past that they've had to chase down different types of data to make informed decisions about what they're going to do with their properties or how their properties are performing. And that's something that's been a real drag on the organization and been a cost driver. So looking at how that can be improved. The next thing here is all about self-service reservations and move-ins. And this is another one of those things that a number of you are probably taking advantage of today, but taking a closer look at what that actually looks like and what that means and how that can drive additional efficiency for your business. This is a big one, and I think an area where I'm going to try and challenge everyone today to think about communications a little bit differently and more efficient ways to do that, to reduce the burden on your staff, while at the same time creating a better tenant experience and storage shopper experience. So there will be some new concepts there we'll share. And then finally, looking at kind of variable rate management and thinking about that in a way, this is another one of those instances where I feel like we as an industry can sometimes see rate management as a dirty word, but we'll unpack a little bit about how that can be used in a way that is really in the tenant's best interest as well. So we'll unpack that. So the biggest thing I want to make sure I'm calling out about all of this, and I'll come back to this point a number of times today, is that when you do this, I think the fear is that as you introduce more automation into your business, that you're going to lose the human element. And I think that is an appropriate fear and one that we should be concerned about. But I really also want to make it clear that a lot of these things are augmenting your staff so that you can be more prompt with communication, so that you can empower customers to do things without having to wait, so that when people do engage with your staff, they're more available, they're more present, and it really just gives you more efficiency from that group and makes the human interaction that much better. So that's something I'll speak to as we go through today. So we'll start with the self-service tenant experience. Now, as I mentioned, there are going to be a number of things that folks may have the capability to do today, but it's a question of whether or not you're actually putting these things into practice. And so this is a good example of this under the tenant experience, tenant self-service umbrella. At the top of this, really thinking about online payments. We mentioned that we're seeing traffic for storage shoppers go up significantly. We're also one of those industries that has traditionally seen a fair amount of in-office payments or in-person payments. And as we've seen COVID-19, the impacts of that, we've seen that number go down dramatically. As a result, we're hearing a lot of reports of credit card processing volume going up pretty dramatically, which is an indication that people are making payments online. And so this is becoming more table stakes than ever before. And really a critical piece of any type of practical automation strategy. Taking this a step further is looking at autopay. Now, I've actually talked to a few operators that have this concept of like a gold star move-in, or somebody that, a type of move-in where they're offering tenant insurance, putting them on autopay, making sure they're doing all the right things to make that customer experience for both the customer better, but also lower lift for their staff. And so autopay is a really good example of that. We all know that collections are a pain, something we don't want to deal with. We also know that it can be inconvenient for customers to call in and make payments or even have to go online. And so why don't we just remove that obstacle and introduce autopay, which is a great way to just drive, again, incremental automation to make business that much simpler. The last piece here is online documents. And this is an area I think that oftentimes gets overlooked. Because I think what we think about is often like the most common points where we are engaging with customers today or tenants today is around paying a bill or gate access. So anything we can do to automate and reduce friction there is going to be helpful. Yes, that's true. However, the number one thing after those two areas is going to be accessing your leases, doing a lease renewal, or even looking at transaction volume. And so all of those things are things that a lot of our customers actually have available to them today, and a lot of folks in the industry across that use really any vendors have access to these same types of capabilities. So we want to make sure that our customers are using that type of thing as well, because this could be a huge time saver for their staff. It can be reinvested in a number of different ways. So that's the self-service tenant experience. I want to move now to the auto-generated marketing ops and financial reporting. And I built a little bit of a framework out here to make this a little bit simple. I think this came into focus in one particular client conversation where we were talking a lot about how so much time is spent chasing down just the raw data and compiling it in Excel or Tableau to try and understand how these things all work together and just getting to the place where they can see a clear rendering of information. And I think what we found as we dove into that is that if you can't access the information to start, it's taking you forever to do that. It can be really tough to get to a place where you're actually interpreting the data and then acting on the data. And it's really this question of accessing, interpreting, and acting that that allows you to refine your business, enhance processes, and help you drive more profitability across your portfolio. And so the real goal is like, how do we get to a place where accessing auto-generated reports is something that is automatic and pushed to us rather than us having to actually go collate and compile all this data for ourselves. So Nirvana here is really getting to a place where accessing the data itself is easy, so that you can spend the time that you would spend otherwise interpreting the data and then putting into effect the changes you're going to make based on the patterns and behaviors that you're seeing across marketing, operations, and finance. Taking that a step further, looking at those three in the context of each other and starting to take a closer look at that is really where we see the biggest opportunity. And leveraging automation to make sure this stuff is being proactively pushed, not just to you, but anyone else who's involved in decision making is going to be a critical piece of this. So from there, we're going to move to self-service reservations and online move-ins. This is going to seem like common sense, but I do think it's worth calling out. As we move more and more to digital, as COVID pushes us further into that digital sphere, there are going to be a number of different lead sources. I put 5 up here, because I think these are some really common ones that we see our customers use. There's paid media through, generally through Google pay-per-click. There's organic search, which is going to come through Google standard. There is the map pack, which we're seeing become an increasingly big traffic driver, which is the actual map you see in Google with your location as a little indication or a dot on there. There are storage marketplaces like SpareFoot and a number of others. And then there's direct traffic that's going to go straight to your site. And so as you think about that and how those leads then feed into your website, when people are in the market and trying to reserve a facility, or reserve a unit or move in, they want to be able to do that conveniently and quick. And so they're going to go to your site, but depending on the preference, they're either going to reserve a unit and go in and want to talk to somebody. They're going to call in directly and forego your website altogether, but just get your phone number from that. Or they're going to do an online move-in if you have that capability. And so either any one of these ways, you're capturing critical customer information and feeding them through that lead funnel to conversion. Now, the challenge here is if you're not using online reservations or online move-ins, essentially what that means is that you're capturing folks that are going to call in directly or willing to be walk-ins. That's great. You're going to get a fair amount of leads that way. However, there are going to be the folks that wanted to reserve online or wanted to move in online. If they don't have that opportunity, then they're going to bounce, and they're going to go back to those different channels and continue shopping. So that's something to be conscious of here. So really making sure that your online move-in process the inventory is up to date, in your online reservation process, that your inventory is up to date, your pricing is up to date, and making sure that that is something that is very apparent on your site is a really critical piece of all of this. The next piece here, I actually think is probably, like I mentioned, the most overlooked piece of everything that I'm going to talk about today. And that is communication automation. And one of the things ways that I like to think about this is actually, it's taking a kind of grid view and saying, okay, there's going to be 2 different things we're looking at here. There's going to be the medium with which we reach customers, but then there's also going to be the way we engage with them once we do reach them. And so looking at that, there are 3 primary channels that we see as the best kind of tenant communication channels. There's email, there's text, and there's mailhouse. And all of these are important, but they all have different applications. And the mix is never the same for any 2 operators. So we need to look at kind of how this works. And so there's 3 different ways we can then go communicate leveraging these channels. There's mass communication, where we're sharing information out broadly. There's event-driven communication, like you think of around like delinquency or lien notices, that could be automated. And then finally, there's the idea of 2-way communication. And so there are going to be instances where dialogue is necessary. Maybe you're reaching out for a late notice, and somebody has a question about their payment. Is there an opportunity for you to then build off of that event-driven communication to then have a back and forth dialogue? So different types of communication are appropriate for different types of things. And the key here is understanding, have you set up automation to be able to, or do you have the ability to automate mass communication? The answer for most is yes. Do you have the ability to automate event-driven communication based on what's happening within your customer relationship database and information? Can you fire a automated late notice when somebody reaches past due, for example? And then once that communication's out in the wild, can you then use that to respond to have a dialogue with a customer, with a tenant in real time? And so the reality is that today there are solutions and there are ways for you to be able to leverage this type of automation across all of these different areas. And you should be considering that heavily to be able to really get the most efficiency from your team. One area, obviously, that it can be tough to see two-way communication is mailhouse. Sending letters back and forth between you and a customer or you and a tenant would be a little bit interesting, something we don't see a whole lot of anymore. So we definitely mark that as an X on this. But again, critical to getting to the place where you're really saving those dollars. So the last piece we're going to walk through here is really just a variable rate management piece. And like automation, I mentioned this before, but rate management is another term that we see in our industry can sometimes be seen as a dirty word. But I think my belief is that actually comes from a misunderstanding about what rate management can and should do. And so I think taking cues from what we see in the airline industry or the hotel industry, where you see rates increase or decrease based on demand at any given time, we have an opportunity to do that in this industry as well. Looking at primarily, and there's a number of ways to set this up. I just called out 3 specific areas here. This deserves, honestly, probably a webinar on its own. But the idea here is that you can use occupancy as an indicator of demand to then determine what your pricing should be by setting different thresholds based on different occupancy types. To say, when demand is low, you may want to drop your prices to see if you can drive that occupancy up. When your occupancy is high, you know that you're commanding a premium in the market, and you can raise those rates up a little bit at times like that. So that's one way to look at that. Also, unit types. You want to be able to do that with a level of granularity down to the unit type level, so that if your 5x10s, for example, are in high demand, you can make sure that those rates are a little bit higher. And then it's not just your units and your occupancy that needs to be a driver of this. Also looking at what your rates are for existing tenants is another way to explore this and think about, for example, if you wanted to levy an increase for folks in a certain zip code or based on some other attribute within their customer record, that is something you can evaluate as well. So the operators that aren't doing this today really are leaving money on the table. And by not making this investment, it can cost you. So it's something to definitely be conscious of. And so what I want to make really clear as we kind of tie off on this is that all of these things work together with your staff. There are ways that you can get more efficiency from the people on your team, but they don't eliminate people on your team. They don't move you into this fully automated world. They do make the tenant experience and your staff experience better while preserving the human element and actually making things a lot quicker, especially around communication and self-service. And so as you think about progressing through this kind of maturity curve, this is the type of efficiency that we believe that operators should be looking to unlock to make sure that they're positioning themselves for success both now and in the future as customer expectations change. And so a couple takeaways before I hand it back to Matt. The first is full automation. The reality is that this is not right for every operator or tenant or storage shopper. In fact, we believe it takes a special type of operator to actually go that route. And it's our strong thinking that it's this practical automation space where most operators should be spending their time right now. And the reason for that is that practical automation can enhance efficiency, again, while preserving that human element. We believe that's really at the heart of what makes a great operation. And lastly, practical automation can support your team to enhance the tenant experience and the staff experience. And so all of those things come together, and that's really where we believe the secret sauce is. So We'll share more information about this in a number of different ways, and that'll be something, especially as we continue to see how the world is shaping up and the way that market dynamics are changing as a result of COVID-19. We'll continue to share this information in the context of how we see technology fitting into the picture. So thank you guys for the time today, and I'm going to hand it back to Matt.
Thank you, Cameron. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Yeah, so I just want to take a quick moment just to thank you, Cameron. That was awesome stuff. That was really, really good. We appreciate you coming on and sharing all these insights.
Of course.
So before I let everybody go, we did get some questions that come in today, some really, really solid questions. But we are a couple minutes over time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So what we'll do is we'll follow up with you guys in the next couple of business days. We've got your email, so just keep an eye out there. And I'll be reaching out personally with some answers to your guys' questions. I'll work with Cameron to get those answered. But then if you can go to the next slide for me here, Cameron, I do want to give a quick reminder kind of what we'll be discussing in 2 weeks. So, today we talked a lot about this concept of simplifying and automating processes. In 2 weeks, what we'll be doing is we'll be having a couple of operators on for a roundtable to kind of discuss how they bring this to life in their portfolio. So giving us a little bit more details about what this looks like for them and what's worked and what's not, and giving you kind of a couple lessons learned to maybe help smooth that transition out as you progress a little bit further along that automation paradigm that Cameron just shared with us. So be on the lookout for an email from the Storable team, probably about mid next week, with a kind of introduction to what that webinar is going to look like. And then on our last slide here, just wanted to say that concludes today's webinar. So if you guys have any questions that come up throughout the week, please feel free to send us an email at webinars@storable.com, and we'll get somebody to respond to you as soon as possible there. But to all of you guys out there, stay healthy, stay safe. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks for our next webinar. So thanks for attending, Cameron. Thanks for your insights, and have a great day, everybody.
Get the power to do more with Storable websites. More marketing, more engagement, more customers moving into your facility. Storable helps operators do more with the most powerful technology in self-storage. Learn more at storable.com/do more.